I'd like to make 3 points about technology before we go into examples and advantages and disadvantages. And the first is that we're talking about the technology of the time. We're not just talking about technology in current time. We're not just talking about social media, but we're talking about things like the printing press, or mimeographing flyers, or the telegraph, or the telephone that made changes, large-scale changes around the world in their times. Landlines, and then mobile. We're talking about photography in the Great Depression, the Dorothea Lange photographs. We're talking about photographs or footage that we see on TV of refugees drowning as they're trying to get to safe land. We're talking about televisions and computers as sources of communication and seeing things live. The power of seeing something live, whether it's on TV or a computer, such as in the civil rights movement, which really brings a movement to a much broader group of people. Movies that cover social issues and social movements that are becoming much more common and much more widely seen. So think of technology broadly. Second point is, technology isn't divorced from everything else that goes on in a social movement. It really needs to be integrated and consistent and self-reinforcing with the social movement's value proposition. So for instance, you don't want to go out on a social movement about the importance of brain development in kids 0 to 5 and use something really, really high-tech or removed from that population or the parents that you're trying to reach. So integration of technology is important to remember as well. And the third point is that technology can be used both for and against social movements. So examples are Chinese censorship, tracking down dissidents with Google accounts, ISIS recruiting with viral videos, Syria shutting down the internet during the Arab Spring, surveillance and punishment of activists in Egypt and around the world, weapons that are technological, smart bombs, drones. So technology cuts 2 ways, but let's start with the advantages. So first advantage is speed and reach. The current example of that, the contemporary example, is really the Arab Spring, which happened out of nowhere with people communicating on mobile phones within a city, and then it jumped from city to city and country to country. It's hard to imagine any other modality that could have created Arab Spring other than the technology. Another use of technology, though, is documentation. So we've certainly seen that in terms of police shootings and revealing what actually happened. Unfiltered videos that are taken by everyday people, not just by police cameras. The other advantage of technology is it can unite people into a movement. The example of Me Too, people far and dispersed. Their only real integration when they came together was online. It's also accessible. Smartphones are now available throughout the world, so it's not just the purview of the rich or the richer countries. There are phones, there are flyers, there are pictures that are really accessible to most people. And finally, technology can be used to transfer resources. So the example of that is in the anti-apartheid movement. Many of the leaders had to flee South Africa, but they were transferring resources in and out of South Africa from around the world, and they were using encrypted communication to be able to build the movement. Again, another use of technology. So the drawbacks. The NRA, for instance, a quote would say, "Online advocacy certainly is here to stay and plays a role in moving your message. However, online advocacy is the lowest form of commitment." So the question becomes, how do you mobilize beyond just the technology? Another example is a TED Talk by Zeynep Tufekci, a Turkish writer, academic, and techno-sociologist, talks about how technology can impede mobilization dynamics, impede the mobilization that's necessary for a social movement to really gain traction. And so she points out a number of issues. One is no face-to-face networks can fade easily because you're not building a community, and it is really a community that's necessary to drive a social movement. That there are selective disincentives for joining. It's easier not to join if there's technology, so why bother? That primary ties really are essential. Remember the civil rights movement, where it was the face-to-face in black churches in the South that really mobilized an extraordinary 90% of people to participate in a strike. And also, she gives some examples like the Brazilian bus fare strike of where technology dissipates energy. People can vote or do something online or come out very quickly, and then it doesn't garner enough juice, enough momentum, enough grit to get anything done. It's kind of like a flash mob. The final criticisms of the use of technology are that it generally doesn't lead to policy change. It's not robust enough. And it's also difficult because if you have various people plugging into technology, it's hard to make decisions and it's hard to innovate. It's hard both to get decisions and change directions or create something new. Technology, I think, it's useful to think of technology as a double-edged sword. Technology can be used by government and sectarian hatred groups to divide people through social media. It's been done in Syria, it's been done in the United States. Opponents of social movements, often governments, but other movements on the other side of the question, or companies, that anybody who has a vested interest in a movement not succeeding can spread misinformation everywhere, and it's very, very hard to separate what's real information, what's fact, and what's not, and increasingly hard to do so. Governments can shut down protests by blocking internet access or take over internet and feed false information, counterfactual information to people, and even get them into the streets and create real havoc and danger. Technology can be used for surveillance, and it can also scramble communications of protesters. So think of technology as the incredible reach and power that it has, but on both sides of a social movement, those for and those against.